welcome to the Daily Signal. I'm your host, Remo, and it's Tuesday, June 10th, 2025. Today, we're covering 10 significant stories that are shaping our world right now. From a tragic school shooting in Austria that's left at least 10 people dead, to major diplomatic developments as Britain imposes new sanctions on Israeli ministers. We'll also dive into political upheavals across 3 continents. Argentina's Supreme Court has just ended Cristina Kirchner's political career, while Brazil's former president Bolsonaro faces historic coup charges. Meanwhile, the war in Ukraine continues to devastate civilian life in Kyiv, and new violence has erupted in Colombia following an assassination attempt on a presidential candidate. We'll also examine how the European Union is tightening its economic grip on Russia with fresh sanctions targeting energy and banking sectors. It's a packed 15 minutes ahead, so let's dive right into today's most important stories. We begin with breaking news from Austria, where a school shooting has claimed at least 10 lives. This tragic event has sent shockwaves through a country where such violence is extremely rare. While details are still emerging, Austrian police have confirmed that the shooting occurred at a school facility, marking one of the deadliest incidents of its kind in the country's recent history. Austria has traditionally maintained some of Europe's strictest gun control laws, making this attack particularly shocking for local communities. The incident highlights a troubling global pattern we've seen in recent years: the increase in school-based violence affecting students, teachers, and families worldwide. For Austrian families, sending their children to school this morning, this represents a fundamental shift in how safe they feel in their daily lives. We'll continue monitoring this developing story as more information becomes available from Austrian authorities. Our thoughts are with the victims, their families, and the entire community dealing with this unimaginable tragedy. Moving to international diplomacy, Britain has imposed sanctions on Israeli far-right ministers over their inflammatory comments regarding Gaza. This represents a significant escalation in diplomatic tensions between the UK and Israel. The sanctions target specific government officials who have made statements that Britain considers inflammatory or potentially harmful to peace efforts in the region. This is particularly noteworthy because the UK has historically been a strong ally of Israel, making these diplomatic measures all the more significant. The move comes amid ongoing international pressure on Israel regarding its military operations in Gaza. For British citizens, this decision reflects their government's attempt to balance support for Israeli security with concerns about civilian casualties and inflammatory rhetoric. These sanctions could influence how other European nations approach similar diplomatic measures, potentially creating a broader pattern of international pressure on Israeli government officials. The Israeli government has yet to respond officially to these specific sanctions. Climate activist Greta Thunberg has been deported from Israel, according to recent reports. The Swedish activist, known worldwide for her climate change advocacy, was apparently removed from the country, though the exact circumstances surrounding her deportation remain unclear. Thunberg has been increasingly vocal about various social justice issues beyond climate change, including her criticism of Israeli policies regarding Palestinians. Her deportation suggests that Israeli authorities viewed her presence as problematic or potentially disruptive. This incident reflects the broader challenges facing international activists who wish to address multiple global issues simultaneously. For supporters of Thunberg's climate activism, this raises questions about whether environmental advocates should engage with other political causes. In Argentina, the Supreme Court has effectively ended Cristina Kirchner's political era with a landmark ruling. This decision marks the conclusion of one of the most influential political careers in modern Argentine history. Kirchner, who served as president from 2007 to 2015 and remained a powerful political figure as vice president, has been a dominant force in Argentine politics for nearly 2 decades. The court's ruling appears to stem from corruption charges that have long shadowed her career. For ordinary Argentines struggling with economic instability and inflation, this decision represents a significant shift in their political landscape. Kirchner's supporters see this as a politically motivated attack on their movement, while her critics view it as long overdue accountability. This ruling could reshape Argentine politics fundamentally, potentially opening space for new political movements or strengthening existing opposition parties. The decision comes at a crucial time for Argentina's economy, which continues to face significant challenges, including high inflation and currency instability. Turning to the United Kingdom, political reporter Chris Mason is highlighting how Chancellor Rachel Reeves's spending priorities have left the government with very little financial flexibility. This analysis reveals the tight budget constraints facing Britain's current administration. The UK government is navigating competing demands for public spending while managing economic pressures, including inflation and sluggish economic growth. Reeves's budget decisions suggest that future spending increases will be extremely difficult to implement without significant trade-offs. For British citizens, this means continued pressure on public services and limited room for new government programs. The tight budget constraints could affect everything from healthcare funding to education investments, making everyday life more challenging for many families. This fiscal reality reflects broader economic challenges facing many developed nations as they balance public spending demands with economic stability concerns. In Brazil, former President Jair Bolsonaro has taken the stand in what's being called a historic coup trial. This moment represents a critical test for Brazilian democracy and the rule of law. Bolsonaro faces charges related to his alleged attempts to undermine Brazil's democratic institutions following his 2022 election defeat. His testimony could determine whether he faces criminal consequences for his actions during the transition period after losing to current President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. For Brazilians, this trial represents more than just one man's fate. It's about whether their democracy can hold powerful figures accountable for anti-democratic actions. The outcome could influence how future Brazilian politicians approach electoral defeats and democratic transitions. The proceedings are being watched closely across Latin America, where several countries have experienced democratic backsliding in recent years. Bolsonaro's supporters maintain his innocence, while his critics argue that accountability is essential for preserving Brazilian democracy. The trial's outcome could have lasting implications for Brazil's political future and its democratic institutions. The conflict in Gaza continues with reports of at least 20 Palestinians killed near an aid distribution site. The Israeli Defense Forces maintain that their troops fired at individuals who posed a threat, highlighting the ongoing complexity and tragedy of this conflict. These incidents near aid sites are particularly concerning because they affect civilians trying to access basic necessities like food and medical supplies. The fact that violence is occurring around humanitarian aid distribution points underscores how the conflict is impacting every aspect of daily life for Gaza residents. For families in Gaza, this means that even seeking essential aid has become dangerous. Parents face impossible choices between risking their safety to get food and medicine for their children or staying in relative safety while their families go without necessities. The international community continues to call for protected humanitarian corridors and ceasefires to allow safe aid distribution. However, the recurring violence around these sites suggests that finding sustainable solutions remains extremely challenging. These incidents also highlight the broader humanitarian crisis affecting Gaza's civilian population, including limited access to food, medical care, and clean water. In Ukraine, the capital city of Kyiv is struggling with widespread sleep deprivation as residents endure nightly air raid sirens and explosions. This ongoing psychological warfare is taking a severe toll on civilian mental health and daily functioning. For Kyiv residents, the constant threat of nighttime attacks means that restful sleep has become nearly impossible. Parents are particularly affected as they must decide whether to move their children to shelters during air raid warnings, often multiple times per night. The sleep deprivation is affecting everything from workplace productivity to children's ability to learn in school. Medical professionals are reporting increased cases of anxiety, depression, and stress-related illnesses among the civilian population. This situation demonstrates how modern warfare affects civilian populations far beyond direct combat casualties, creating long-term health and psychological impacts that will likely persist long after active conflict ends. Colombia is experiencing a surge in bomb attacks following the shooting of a presidential candidate, creating a dangerous escalation in political violence. These incidents represent a troubling return to the kind of political violence that plagued Colombia for decades. The targeting of political candidates threatens Colombia's democratic processes and could discourage qualified individuals from seeking public office. For Colombian voters, this violence creates an atmosphere of fear around political participation and democratic expression. The bomb attacks suggest that organized groups are attempting to influence political outcomes through violence and intimidation. This pattern echoes Colombia's difficult past with narco-terrorism and political violence that the country has worked hard to overcome. Colombian authorities are working to identify those responsible while protecting other political candidates and maintaining security around electoral processes. The international community is closely watching these developments, given Colombia's strategic importance in regional stability. Finally, the European Union is implementing new sanctions targeting Russia's energy sector and banking industry, representing a continued escalation in economic pressure over the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. These sanctions specifically target energy infrastructure and financial institutions that the EU believes are supporting Russia's military operations. By focusing on energy and banking, the EU is attempting to reduce Russia's ability to fund its military while limiting its capacity to export energy resources. For European citizens, these sanctions could have mixed effects, potentially contributing to energy price stability in the long term, while possibly causing short-term economic disruptions. The EU is balancing its desire to pressure Russia with concerns about economic impacts on its own member states. The sanctions represent the EU's largest coordinated economic response to international aggression in recent memory. Their effectiveness will likely depend on how well European nations can maintain unity while managing their own economic challenges. These measures also signal to other nations that the EU is willing to use economic tools as a form of diplomatic pressure, potentially influencing how other international conflicts are addressed. As we wrap up today's Daily Signal, several themes emerge from today's news that are worth reflecting on. We're seeing democracy under pressure in multiple countries, from Brazil's coup trial to Colombia's political violence, and from Argentina's judicial decisions to ongoing conflicts that affect civilian life. These stories remind us that democratic institutions require constant vigilance and protection. We're also witnessing the global nature of contemporary challenges, whether it's the diplomatic tensions between Britain and Israel, the EU's economic pressure on Russia, or the international attention on school safety following Austria's tragedy. Today's events demonstrate how interconnected our world has become. Perhaps most importantly, behind every headline we've discussed today are real people, families in Kyiv losing sleep, students in Austria returning to school tomorrow, Argentine citizens adjusting to political change, and aid workers in Gaza trying to help those in need. Thank you for joining us on the Daily Signal. I'm Remo, and we'll be back tomorrow with another 15 minutes of the stories that matter most to you and your world. Stay informed, stay engaged, and take care of each other.